The moment I saw it, I thought I was hallucinating. Right there, on my private dock, sat a massive, bubbling hot tub. Steam rose lazily from the surface, curling into the crisp morning air as if mocking me. My dock, my lake, my land. And yet, there it was, humming like it owned the place. My first thought was that maybe some rich tourists had somehow mistaken my property for a resort. But then, I noticed the monogrammed towels, the empty wine glasses resting on the wooden planks, and worst of all, the unmistakable sound of Karen's obnoxious laugh floating through the air. I clenched my fist. Of course, it was Karen. My self-entitled, boundary-ignoring neighbor. The woman who thought the world revolved around her, who once tried to claim the apples from my orchard because the tree's branches extended slightly past the fence. The same Karen who had, accidentally, parked her car in my driveway so many times that I once had to tow it just to get out. And now this? A whole hot tub? She had officially lost her mind. Just as I was trying to process the audacity, Karen waltzed onto the dock like she was about to grace the cover of some overpriced lifestyle magazine. Wrapped in a plush robe, sunglasses perched on her nose, she took a sip from a ridiculously oversized wine glass. Spotting me, she didn't react like a guilty trespasser who had just been caught. No. Instead, she gave me a slow, smug smile. "Oh, hey there," she chirped, as if we were casual friends running into each other at the grocery store. "You're up early. Isn't it just the perfect morning for a soak?" I stared at her, waiting for an explanation. None came. "Karen," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "What is that?" She blinked at me innocently. "A hot tub." "I know it's a hot tub. I mean, what is it doing on my dock?" She let out an exaggerated sigh, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Oh, don't be like that. It's just a little setup for relaxation. This lake is so peaceful, and I figured, why not make the most of it?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to suppress the rage bubbling up inside me. "You figured? Karen, this is my dock. My private property. You can't just plop a whole damn hot tub here like it's a public beach." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please. Don't be so territorial. You hardly use this space. I thought it would be such a waste to leave it empty when we could all be enjoying it." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Losing my temper wouldn't help, and Karen thrived on drama. "How did you even get it here?" I demanded. "Oh, it wasn't easy," she said, taking another sip of wine. "Had to hire a few guys to haul it over. It was quite the ordeal, let me tell you. But look at it. So worth it." I gritted my teeth. "And who exactly gave you permission to do this?" Karen gave a light, dismissive laugh. "Oh, I just assumed you wouldn't mind. I mean, we're neighbors. Sharing is caring, right?" Sharing? That was rich, coming from the woman who once threw a fit because I planted sunflowers near our property line and she claimed they were blocking her sunset view. I took a slow step forward, forcing myself to stay composed. "All right. Let's say, for some insane reason, I was willing to ignore the fact that you trespassed and installed a whole hot tub on my property without asking. What I cannot ignore is the fact that this thing is running on my electricity." Karen pursed her lips. "Oh, that. Yeah, I had it wired up the other day. The guys said it was super easy to connect it to your system. It barely makes a dent in your bill. Don't be so dramatic." I felt my eye twitch. Barely a dent? I hadn't checked my latest bill yet, but I already knew that was a blatant lie. A hot tub running 24/7? That was far from a minor cost. Karen, oblivious or simply uncaring, stretched her arms and let out a relaxed sigh. "Honestly, I don't know why you're so upset. It's not like I stole anything. I paid for the hot tub, you know. It's mine. I just needed a good spot to put it, and your dock was perfect." "You mean my private dock?" I corrected through gritted teeth. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. It's just sitting there, doing nothing most of the time. I'm actually enhancing the space. You should be thanking me." I opened my mouth, then closed it. There were no words to properly express the sheer level of what the hell I was feeling. Karen stood up, adjusting her robe. Look, if it really bothers you, we can talk about some kind of arrangement. Maybe I can let you use it on Wednesdays or something? The sheer audacity nearly made me choke. Let me use it? I repeated. She nodded. Yeah, like a neighborly agreement. We can work something out. I took a deep, calming breath. No, Karen. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to remove this thing today. Otherwise, I will. She scoffed. You wouldn't dare. I held her gaze. Try me. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But then she flipped her hair over her shoulder and smirked. Well, good luck with that. You see, it's kind of bolted down now. The guys did a real thorough job securing it. Removing it would be such a hassle. My jaw clenched. She had bolted it down? She had actually gone out of her way to permanently attach this thing to my dock? Karen picked up her wine glass and turned toward the hot tub. Anyway, I'd love to stay and chat, but my water's getting cold. Cheers. She stepped in, sinking into the steaming water with a satisfied sigh. Meanwhile, I stood there, fists clenched, feeling the kind of rage that could make a man do things he normally wouldn't. I had given her a warning. A fair one. She had laughed it off. Fine. She wanted to play games? She had no idea who she was messing with. I stared at my latest electricity bill, my hands gripping the paper so tightly that it crinkled at the edges. My usual bill had practically doubled. That hot tub, that steaming, humming monstrosity sitting on my dock, was eating through my wallet like a swarm of locusts. And Karen? She was still lounging in it every day, sipping overpriced wine, inviting her equally entitled friends over, acting like she had just claimed a piece of my property by sheer force of arrogance. I had tried to reason with her, which, in hindsight, was like trying to have a philosophical debate with a brick wall. I had warned her. She had laughed. I had threatened action. She had smirked. Every time I confronted her, she twisted the situation until somehow, in her twisted logic, I was the unreasonable one. According to Karen, I was a selfish, grumpy neighbor who didn't understand the concept of sharing. She even had the audacity to suggest that I should be grateful because the hot tub added value to my dock. The final straw came when I overheard her talking to someone on the phone. I had been walking down toward the lake when I caught snippets of her conversation. She was lounging in the hot tub, swirling her wine glass like some kind of aristocrat and bragging. Oh yeah, it's amazing, she said. Perfect spot, totally private. And the best part? I don't even have to pay for the electricity. My neighbor is covering it. He's so clueless, I don't think he even knows how much energy this thing sucks up. I stopped dead in my tracks. I had expected entitlement. I had expected pettiness. But this was another level. I took a slow breath, turned around, and walked away. I needed a plan. A real plan. No more warnings. No more trying to reason with her. If Karen wanted to act like she owned my dock, I was about to teach her what it really meant to be out of her depth. The first thing I did was cut off her power. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would make her immediately suspicious. Just a quick, quiet trip to my breaker box. One little flick of a switch. That night, I sat back on my porch, watching as the lights on the hot tub sputtered out. Karen, still in her robe, stood on the dock, pressing buttons furiously. I could hear her huffing, complaining, cursing under her breath. Eventually, she stormed back to her house, probably assuming the power would magically fix itself by morning. It didn't. The next day, she was back, fiddling with wires, tapping at her phone, likely Googling, "Why is my stolen hot tub not working?" She called someone. Probably an electrician, but they wouldn't be able to do anything without permission from the actual property owner. That, of course, was me. I thought she would take the hint. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would realize that the fun was over and move the hot tub off my dock. But no. Karen had the kind of determination that only truly delusional people possess. Instead of giving up, she doubled down. The next time I walked past the dock, I noticed something new. A long, heavy-duty extension cord running from her house, all the way down to the hot tub. She had found a way to power it from her own home. I almost respected the dedication. Almost. Fine. If she wanted to play stubborn, I was more than happy to play along. The next morning, I took a casual stroll down to my dock and made a few subtle changes. Nothing extreme, just inconvenient. I removed a couple of key screws from the steps leading up to the dock, making them wobbly. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to be annoying. I left a few baited fishing lines hanging nearby, making it impossible to step onto the dock without carefully maneuvering around them. Then, as a finishing touch, I introduced a few new residents to her hot tub, specifically 3 large, enthusiastic bullfrogs. I didn't stick around to watch, but I heard the scream from my house. It was followed by a loud splash and a string of curses. I smiled to myself. Small victories. Unfortunately, Karen was not the type to be easily discouraged. The next day, she was back, shooing the frogs away, reinforcing the steps, and acting like none of this was affecting her. That was when I realized I needed to stop playing games. If I wanted this hot tub gone, I had to do something big. I started thinking. The hot tub was attached to my dock, but it wasn't permanent. Karen had it bolted down, but bolts could be undone. The key was doing it in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion. I couldn't just drag the tub away. She would notice. No, I needed something more poetic. And then it hit me. What if, instead of removing the hot tub, I just set it free? That night, while Karen was asleep, I made my move. Armed with my toolbox, I carefully loosened the bolts securing the hot tub. It wasn't easy. The thing was heavy, and I had to work slowly to avoid making too much noise. I unfastened the last bolt, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted this to be perfect. Using a rope, I tied the tub to the dock just enough to keep it from floating away immediately. I wanted it to seem stable, secure. But the moment Karen stepped in the next morning, the weight shift would be just enough to send it drifting into the lake. As a final touch, I placed a small waterproof speaker under the tub, programmed to play eerie, distorted sounds at random intervals. Gurgling noises. Faint whispers. The occasional deep, echoing splash. Nothing too obvious. Just enough to unsettle someone who was already out of their element. By the time I was done, the dock looked untouched. The hot tub sat there, looking as smug as ever, completely unaware of the fate that awaited it. I barely slept that night. I was too excited. Tomorrow was going to be glorious. The next morning, I sat on my porch with my coffee, eyes locked on the dock like a man waiting for fireworks on the 4th of July. The air was crisp, the lake was still, and the sun had just begun to rise over the trees. It was the perfect setting for what was about to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. Just as expected, Karen emerged from her house in her usual self-important fashion, robe flowing, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, and a fresh glass of wine in hand, because nothing says classy morning like drinking at sunrise in a stolen hot tub. She made her way to the dock, completely oblivious to the fact that I had been working in secret the night before. I watched as she stepped onto the planks, humming to herself, completely at ease. Then, with a satisfied sigh, she sank into the bubbling water, swishing her wine glass like some kind of lakefront royalty. For a moment, nothing happened. I sipped my coffee, waiting. Then, ever so slowly, the hot tub began to drift. At first, it was subtle. Just a gentle shift, a barely noticeable change in position as the loose rope keeping it tethered stretched and began to give way. Karen, still lost in whatever fantasy world she lived in, didn't notice. She leaned her head back, eyes closed, enjoying her self-proclaimed private retreat. And then, the last of the rope slipped free. The tub moved, just a few inches at first, then a foot, then another. The current caught it, pulling it ever so gently away from the dock. Still, Karen remained oblivious, swirling her wine, muttering something about lake serenity. It wasn't until she reached for the edge of the dock and found nothing but air that her eyes snapped open. I wish I could have taken a picture of the moment it hit her. Her head jerked up. She blinked, confused, looking around as if the dock had somehow disappeared instead of the hot tub moving. The realization dawned on her in stages, and when it finally sank in, her jaw dropped. She gasped, scrambling to sit up straighter, gripping the edges of the tub as if that would somehow stop its slow, inevitable journey toward the center of the lake. The panic set in quickly. Wait, what's happening?" she yelped, twisting around, searching for something, anything, to grab onto. But there was nothing. Just open water. The hot tub was floating, drifting, slipping further and further from shore. I took another slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. Karen, now fully upright, flailed her arms, her wine glass tipping over and spilling red liquid into the steaming water. No. What the hell is going on?" she shrieked, her voice echoing across the lake. The best part was that she couldn't exactly jump out. The lake was deep in the middle, and while the tub itself wasn't the most stable vessel, it was still preferable to plunging into the cold water. She was trapped, forced to ride the current like an entitled captain stranded on her own ridiculous ship. Then, the speaker under the tub kicked in. A low, gurgling sound rose from beneath the water, a deep, unnatural noise that echoed through the lake. Karen froze. The color drained from her face. Another sound followed, a faint whispering, distorted and eerie, as if something was lurking just beneath the surface. Karen's breath hitched. Her head snapped left and right, her hands gripping the tub so hard her knuckles turned white. What was that?" she whispered, barely audible. I leaned back in my chair, amused. The sounds had been carefully planned, just unsettling enough to make her uneasy without immediately revealing that it was a prank. And judging by the way she was staring into the water like she expected something to rise up and drag her under, it was working. Another gurgle. A soft, bubbling chuckle. Then a splash, perfectly timed. Karen lost it. She screamed, scrambling to the far side of the tub, making it wobble dangerously. "Oh my God! Something's in the water!" she screeched, her voice going so high-pitched it could have shattered glass. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. She started paddling with her hands, trying desperately to steer herself back toward the dock. It was pointless. The current had taken over, and no amount of frantic splashing was going to change that. The hot tub continued its lazy journey toward the center of the lake, with Karen trapped inside, now actively crying. She fumbled for her phone, probably to call for help, but in her panic she lost her grip. The phone slipped from her fingers, tumbled over the side, and vanished beneath the water with a quiet plop. Karen let out a noise somewhere between a sob and a wail. "Oh no, she shrieked, leaning over the side as if she could somehow reach into the depths and retrieve it. "My phone!" I let out a low whistle. Tough luck. At this point, the commotion had started to attract attention. A few of the other lakefront homeowners were stepping out onto their porches, squinting at the bizarre sight of a woman floating away in a stolen hot tub. A couple of passing kayakers slowed, watching with open amusement. Karen, now fully panicked, turned toward shore. "Somebody help me!" she wailed, waving her arms. One of the kayakers called back, "Do you need a tow?" Karen hesitated, then screamed, "Yes!" The kayaker, a middle-aged man with an amused smirk, nodded. "That'll be $50. Karen gaped at him. "Are you kidding me?" He shrugged. "Gas prices, you know." I nearly choked on my coffee. She let out an angry screech but had no other option. The guy paddled over, tossed her a rope, and slowly began towing her ridiculous floating disaster back toward the dock. By the time she made it back, dripping wet, covered in lake water, and absolutely humiliated, a small crowd had gathered. To make matters worse, just as she was climbing out, a lake patrol officer pulled up. Apparently, someone had reported an unauthorized floating object on the lake, and Karen's little stunt had attracted just enough attention to get the authorities involved. The officer, a stern-looking woman in a uniform, folded her arms. "Ma'am, do you have a permit for that hot tub?" Karen, still gasping, dripping, and visibly shaken, blinked at her. "A what?" "A permit," the officer repeated. "Hot tubs aren't allowed on the water without approval. And considering you attached it to someone else's dock without permission, that's another issue altogether." Karen stammered, flailing for words, but the officer had already pulled out a notepad. "Looks like we'll need to discuss some fines." I had never seen Karen's face turn that shade of red before. By the time it was all over, Karen stormed back to her house, humiliated, furious, and dripping wet. The hot tub, meanwhile, was towed away, never to return. As I leaned back on my porch, sipping the last of my coffee, I couldn't help but smile. My dock was mine again. And Karen? She would never mess with me again.